So when one studies the Alexander technique, there's usually a few like seminal books that most teachers or group courses will first recommend. And they tend to be on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like one is more abstract and philosophical, that's Michael Gelb's body learning. And then there's body mapping by Robert Conable that are a little bit more on the ergonomic, anatomical side of things. And then there's all sorts of things in between. Someone like Pedro de Alcantara, who is a Juilliard-trained cellist, his book Indirect Procedures, aimed at classical musicians, but really anybody who does anything creative. It's a blend thereof of the different things, of the two extremes. And Michael Gelb is an interesting thinker. He's done a lot of other things in his life. What I've heard of his workshops are that, because he comes from a bit of a circus background, juggling background, is that if you want to learn to juggle with him and as an activity to apply the Alexander technique, I don't know if he still does this, but I love this image, and I heard this from several Alexander teachers back in the day, that he would require you to just kind of go in and drop the balls, like let the balls drop before he would really emphasize like how to keep the balls in the air. And I've heard other kind of circus arts people talk about this kind of thing, like you got to really get good at falling, you know, or in dance situations, you got to get good at falling before we can try not to fall. Because if you're always living with the fear of I'm going to fall, it's going to hold you back. There's all these things in the self-help world right now, or just the culture of like the let them or let the chips fall where they're going to fall. I love just the image of the jugglers wanting to juggle, and like you have to get really comfortable at letting the balls fall. Because, and Pedro de Alcantara, whom I've had some lessons with over the years, he would do what some people found very anxiety-producing. There's this idea of chair work where you practice getting in and out of a chair in Alexander, and he would use a stool and he would like move the stool as you were moving into the chair. And so that you really had to surrender any idea about when you might make contact with it or not, and so that you were fully present with not only your own motor control, but that own internal locus of, am I capitulating to habit? Am I aware? Am I directed? Am I poised to go in any direction at any moment based off of new sensory information? So that you didn't just get fixed into the idea of, oh yeah, there's the chair, I saw it 30 seconds ago and it's still going to be there. And he used to also emphasize this idea of, and it actually comes from a quote from Georges Braque, the Cubist painter, but that paraphrasing that, the ability to say I don't know actually begets so much space and openness and like the mindset to let in so much more information and relevance. And yeah, the more you know of something, ironically, it tends to be, the more questions you have about the thing and the deeper your connection to all of the nuances and mysteries that abound within that. So I think about that in life. If you're fearful of something or you're struggling with something, like drop all the pretense, like drop the balls, let the chips fall. And, even if it's something like, oh, I'm struggling with this heartache, or I lost my job or something, I like to practice this self-interrogative process of, well, what does that mean? It's something that you would do in therapy, but to do it all the time with myself and in a way where I'm really like feeling that and just kind of almost metaphorically seeing the balls drop and seeing the mess of it all come down. So that then, 5 seconds later when I pick myself up and I have to go to the next interview, or I have to go on the next date, or I have to, be in the next difficult conversation, whatever it might be, I can do so without this underlying, sometimes overwhelming fear or this need to control what if, because I've already dealt with the what ifs the balls fall out of the air. And there's kind of a beauty and a craziness and a surrender and all that. And one of my favorite stories about falling is about Darcy Kistler, who was the last Balanchine dancer or ballerina handpicked by George Balanchine when she was like 15. And apparently at her audition, and there were a bunch of other dancers on stage, she went for some, grand jeté or some big leap, and she fell flat on her face or her bum or something. But it was a big fall. And immediately Balanchine popped up from his seat at the back of the auditorium and was like, yes. Because what he recognized in that was an abandon, was a commitment, was like artistic fearlessness, that she went for it and it didn't work out. But we can iron out the technicalities. Like, I can't teach that fearlessness. I can't teach that openness, that quote unquote saying yes to life. And so, yeah, you got to say yes to life, and you'll definitely fall a few times, but the falling is sort of beyond the point.